They say music feeds the soul and food feeds the heart. So please join us for season 2 of Brunch with a Black Man, where we sit down with Black men from across the world who talk about their experiences with mental health, mental wellness, and how they are taking on their own mental health journey. We sit down over brunch to break it down. Make sure you join us for season 2 of Brunch with a Black Man. Hello and welcome to another edition of Brunch with a Black Man. I'm your host, Miracle Jones, and we are sitting down with Dominic, aka Dom the Greatest. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Doing good. So let's get right into it. Talk a little bit about how little Dom grew up. What was little Dom doing around like 2, 3, 4 years old?
Yeah, getting in trouble. Things was complicated for me at that young age. You know, I grew up in Brooklyn, East Flatbush, at the height of the crack epidemic, where there were tons of challenges in my community. And my mother leveraged sort of like her ability to try to keep me on track with how she was raised. And so I went through the public school system and just really tried to work really hard to stay grounded. But my environment had a lot to do with how I was trying to figure out my place in the world really at a young age, but deal with a lot of the challenges that were going on in my community.
You talk about growing up in Brooklyn. What was like the average day in the life? You wake up, do what?
Yeah, it was violent. I mean, I would wake up and, do the normal sort of like hygiene things, and I would get up and I would go to school. And at that time, it was a lot going on. I would leave my house and I would see, crack piles all over the place. I would see people who looked like me struggle. And even at a young age, I knew that there was something wrong with that. I didn't feel like those were the things that I was supposed to be experiencing at a young age, going through the public school system. And there was fear, and there were other things that I was attempting to manage in that environment.
How you're attempting to manage things, how did like hip hop get introduced to you, right? Because like that's kind of the soundtrack of your life as a young person.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Like how did that foray go for you?
Yeah, I mean, hip hop was a large part of what was happening in my community. It was it was a form of art that we sort of like leaned on heavily to express ourselves. It was an element of what I relied on to, listen to my music and stay connected with people who looked like me and had similar experiences.
Do you remember the first hip hop song that you were like, this song is about me, it's speaking to me, like this is my song?
Okay, KRS-One.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. There was a lot of rappers. There was a rapper out of oh my god, I'm trying to think of her name, but KRS-One was like the one who was like leading this song. I'm trying to think of it right now. But that had a lot of impact on me, and believe it or not, Flavor Flav, and Public Enemy, they also had a lot to do with encouraging young black men, and Fight the Power was like something that really jumped out and resonated with me.
And so you're going through, you're navigating, being in the school, you're navigating, understanding that what you see around you isn't the life that you're supposed to be having, and it's supposed to be different. And then you're falling in love with like hip hop, you're moving around that type of way. And then you kind of hit some bumps in the road. What led you to the situation that happened when you were 19?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, hit some bumps in the road along the way. Yeah, what essentially happened was I have a twin brother. He was jumped by several other teens. And where I grew up at, you met violence with violence. And I brought a firearm to an already charged in a terrible situation, and a fight ensued. One of the teams attempted to take a firearm out of my hand, and after a short struggle, I discharged that firearm and shot and killed another young man. I constantly sort of like struggled with the effect, the impact that I had on that young man and his family. But yeah, shortly after the incident, I had a conversation with my mother, my grandmother, my uncle, the late great Michael K. Williams, and said, look, this happened, and we need to figure out like what next steps looked like. That led to me, being arrested, charged, and ultimately convicted for murder, and being sentenced to a term of 25 years to life in prison at the age of 19.
So you're 19 years old, you get that sentence. What is going through your head? Because you started out trying to just defend your brother, and now you've created this world where this pain is now like your reality.
Yeah, a lot going through my head. I think the first thing that went through my head was being responsible for taking another human being's life. It was something that I struggled with back then, and 25 years later, wake up in the morning and think about the impact that I had on my community. So yeah, being sentenced to more time in prison than I lived on this earth was something that I was thinking about. But most importantly, I was thinking about, the victim in my case. His name is Nolan Prophet. What's sort of like interesting about this story is that my twin brother's name is Nolan. So I constantly, it's hard for me not to think about my twin brother, who I'm extremely close with, without not thinking about what I identify as the other Nolan. And so yeah, that's something that I still wrestle with. When I think about, what was going on in my mind back then, I think it was really trying to protect my family. But I think that I know that there are ways to do that without introducing a firearm into an already, charged situation.
And so you're 19, like you said, you're facing more time in prison than you've experienced in the world. You are put into a very violent situation, which is like the New York prison system. How were you able to navigate that new reality for you, and how were you able to maintain like your mental health and well-being while facing time?
Yeah, I think there were three things that I sort of like leveraged and relied on to not allow insanity to creep in on me. And I think it was my faith and my family and my freedom. This idea that one day I might have an opportunity to be released from the cage that I was living in for decades at a time is what I leveraged. The other thing was, I didn't want to send my mother to her grave worrying about me. So I immersed myself in anything that was positive in a negative environment like prison. And it was those things that I relied on to keep me grounded. And, like you said, prison is a violent place. I witnessed 3 people murdered in prison. What people are seeing now with young men being, beaten to death on camera was something that was happening on an ongoing basis. And there are challenges that we need to look at. But it was those things in the work that I do now that I was doing on the inside that has transcended from beyond the wall into the community, that has really kept me grounded, that people would look at me and model my behavior, that they would see hope in an environment that feels hopeless, were the things that I used to keep me grounded and to, you know, stay well. Stay well. Mental health it's a serious thing, it's an important thing, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about what wellness looks like for people who look like me and come from zip codes where there's nothing but poverty and challenges and hurt and pain.
Yeah, because I was talking to someone, and this the reality is, growing up in places, you'll get a parole officer or a probation officer before you get a social worker or a therapist. So you're in this very place that you're seeing this violence, you're seeing this chaos, but also at the same time, you're in a situation where you look on the TV and you can see your uncle playing someone who's also wrestling with the same exact things that you're dealing with. How was that experience for you? Because I think that people may understand being incarcerated, but you're incarcerated with someone and you're connected to someone who's like a celebrity talking about the same exact like violent structure. How was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, before Michael got cast for the role Omar Devon Little on The Wire, uh, I didn't know what was going on. I was in prison. People were coming into prison, employees saying, "Oh my God, there's this show called The Wire, and you know, this is, this is amazing. This character." And then I did some reading while I was in prison. I obtained my associate's degree, and every once in a while, when I was trying to, you know, have a little downtime on, reading books and around history and, social studies and psychology, I'd pick up a magazine, and that's how it was introduced to me that my uncle had some really interesting role on a show that has been identified as the best show on TV, is how that came to me. But yeah, his experiences, his challenges, this idea that, Michael's character was one that was identified as the Robin Hood of the hood, spoke to, our moral compass and, how we were raised and the values that we had, but also the challenges of someone who struggled with addiction and was trying to cope with all of the traumatic things that young Black and brown people face in marginalized communities. You're 100% correct. That's nothing new. And, we should be asking ourselves and having larger questions about why poverty is not a crime. Why is it easier to get help once you're in prison or go to prison than it is before you get there? Why are more people from my zip codes, these 7 specific neighborhoods, are more likely to go to prison than they are to college? And so that was very interesting. And then his role in a show called The Night Of, where he, was an incarcerated individual on Rikers Island and had a lot of influence. And, he's talked about it in interviews that he used to drive past my prison to go on set for that specific role. Is reminiscent of, leveraging these sort of like terrible experiences and stories to hopefully bring awareness and raise awareness about the work that needs to happen.
When you talk about bringing awareness about the work that needs to happen, you eventually get a pardon from the governor, and you're able to come home. You knew you were coming home, but now you don't have that 25, plus sentence. You did that work, a lot of that unlearning in the prison system.
Yeah.
Coming home that first 60 days, what was that like?
I have to say I was really fortunate. The day that I was released, I had my uncle who was present. We were filming a documentary called Raised in the System, which highlights the school to prison pipeline and all of the nuances that we are still dealing with today, those challenges. So my experience of coming home after serving 20 years, 7 months, and 18 days of my life in a cage was different from what most people experience. I had, an uncle who loved me and cared about me and supported me. I had other family members who cared about me, loved me, and supported me, and walked me through this process of every single thing that I needed. Not to mention the fact of how I came home, was the subject of newspaper articles and, TV shows. And so my experience was different. I had the support. My first 60 days was, me, codifying the things that I had learned in prison and connecting with folks and seeing how that I could help, leverage Michael's celebrity status with my lived experience as a means to provide more support to people who were not only on Rikers Island, but were being sentenced to long terms in state prison as well. And we took that message. My first 60 days was me, leveraging my lived experience in these institutions and correctional facilities and saying, listen, guys, I just came home. This is what life is like on the other side. The air feels different on this side of the wall. So my first 60 days were really good, but I think it's important to identify that most people who are coming home from serving long sentences, their experiences are different. They struggle with getting ID, they struggle with getting housing and employment, they struggle with, understanding what it is to feel like you're free from prison because you've been released, but knowing that you have to be home by 9 p.m. And if you're 5 minutes late or 2 minutes late, you can end back up in a state prison the next day. That healthcare isn't easy to get, and you have to look at not having healthcare at all, and now feeling like there might be a system in place to help you get healthcare, and the nuances around that. Not being able to get it because you don't have your social security card or birth certificate, because that's not what you did when you went to prison, 20 years ago. So overall, my experience was great the first 60 days, but I did have challenges as well. People who, not everyone wants to see someone be successful. And I leverage my social capital to have larger conversations with folks to, one, allow me to continue to be successful, but help the people behind me be successful.
And you came home and you were like, I'm not going to forget about the people who I just spent 20 years with. I'm not going to forget about the people on the inside. And you started to do work that brought the art and this fight against the prison industrial system together. Why was it so important for you to make sure that art and music continue to be a mainstay fixture in your journey?
Yeah, what Michael would say is I could see him sort of winking at us as we're having this conversation right now. He would say the art saved my life, and it was, his ability to leverage a lot of his struggles and build on those things through the arts, and that makes me happy to know that I'm working really hard to continue building his legacy as I build mine. With regard to partnering with folks, look, these systems have been in place. They will be in place probably long after you and I are gone. And they're designed a specific way, and they're working exactly the way that they were designed to work. My goal is to dismantle some of these systems. And to do that, I had to go back in and work with folks to ensure that they understood what our need was. And that has sort of allowed me to be in a position where I've been to more prisons since I've been out of prison than when I was in prison. And a large part of the reason why I go back in is to remind people that we don't have to be identified by that one worst moment in our life. And we can leverage our lived experiences to help people and build on these experiences in ways that folks may not understand that we need to build on them. And a lot of that work means that I need to have conversation with these folks. Everything in my mind starts with a conversation and building on understanding and raising awareness. And that has given me the ability to work with the last 3 police commissioners, the last 3 probation commissioners, state, local, federal folks, with this idea that we could shift what culture looks like for people who are not only serving sentences in prison, but will hopefully be released from prison. And when they're released, what does that mean? How do we impact the community in a really, really positive way? I think is a large part of what my mission is, what my goal is. And, like I said, that means having these important conversations about what people are attached to, what are they struggling with? And we know that a large part of what they struggle with is access and what that looks like. And yeah, I'm going to continue to bring these conversations and this message to every corner of the earth. There's a lot going on at my school at Columbia University right now, and my goal is to work closely with folks to build community, to build trust. A lot of that isn't happening right now. And we're building out a new group there that's focused on what we identify as we call it SIS, System Impacted Scholars. And yeah, like I said, this work will continue. We're bringing it to academia, we're bringing it to government folks, we're bringing it to grassroots organizations who are on the ground that have skin in the game, with the hope that we can leverage these experiences and get people the help that they need.
And so what is it like for you to want to do all of this work? Like, how do you take care of yourself as you're doing this work?
Yeah, I mean, this is important work. This is an important conversation, and that's the reason why I'm so honored really to be here. How do I take care of myself? I think a lot of what I do is I continue to stay close to people that I trust and have the same mission, the same vision that I have to build community and to build support. I think another element of what I do is I work closely to, having conversations with people like you who understand what the real need is. So it's those things that I do and then I exercise, I play music, I, turn my music up in my car real loud as I'm heading to the train station to come into the city. And it's those simple things that I do to take care of myself and not allow myself to be overwhelmed with some of the huge dynamics and frustrations that may come with trying to convince people of the importance of continuing these conversations.
You talked about being very close to your brother and, y'all are being a twin.
Mm-hmm.
So how was that really, were you able to maintain that relationship for those 20 years, and what is that relationship like now?
Yeah, so the way that we maintained it was my brother visited me every month for the 21 years that I served in prison. Some Thanksgivings, some Christmases. He unarguably the support from my wife and family has been nothing like I've ever heard from anyone else who served as much time in prison as I did. The support that they continue to show me has been unmatched, unlike anything that I've heard or experienced in the 7 years that I've been out of prison. I think it's those conversations and that level of support that has really allowed me to advance in the spaces that I've advanced in. And yeah, so that relationship is great. It's grounded. I talk to my brother like 3, 4, 5 times a day. I mean, it's nuts. But it's that relationship and the break that we had that I think has made us stronger. So yeah, it's those things that I think about.
When you came home, what was like the first thing like y'all did together?
We went out to eat. One of the first restaurants he took me to was a steakhouse that I love called Peter Luger's, which happened to be like 5 or 10 minutes from where my uncle lived at. So that was one of the first things that we did. And then we just, enjoyed each other's space, I've been doing this work for a little bit of time, and my brother, he's also a big Jay-Z fan, and when I had a chance to meet Jay, he told me, he said, things don't happen to you, they happen for you. That's what Jay told me. And I was like, when I was there, so it was me, Jay, Meek, and we're having a conversation like about the importance of like staying grounded and just focused. But I believe that how we manage when those things happen, I think is a large part of like, what we're talking about now, the Black experience. But I say that to say that we listened to a Jay-Z song. My brother loves Jay-Z, and so when I met him 2 years later, it was interesting that that conversation came up that way.
And so you are home. You said 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
You're married.
Mm-hmm.
You're living life. You have your theater, production. You're at, Columbia, as you said, getting your degree. What does life look like for you in 2 years and 5 years? What is the goals that you're fighting for now?
Yeah, I mean, so this, I'm fighting for to make people aware that a lot of my brothers and sisters who are struggling, they're not fighting for a first chance, they're really fighting for a second and a third. And I want to continue to, bring that to important spaces and help people understand that. So what I'm fighting for now is what I will be fighting for the rest of my life. When people have conversations about me when I'm long gone, it will be that Dominic was a servant leader. He led by service. And I think that's what I will continue to fight for, to serve people, to help people, to support people. So my life won't just look like that for the next 2-3 years. It'll look like that for as long as I'm on this earth and I have breath in me. But I don't know what's next. I'm open to embracing, whatever is, coming down the pipe for me. I believe in destiny. I believe in people, and I want people to understand that I believe in them, and I will support them and support the work that they need to do on the inside so that they can make a successful transition on the outside. And But that also starts with um, taking care of ourselves. You said it best. And how we do that and what that looks like, I think, is a large part of what this conversation is about today. And how do we support people? And that's what my work will be: supporting people, believing in people, modeling this idea that we can make it out, but not just get out, but we can stay out. And when you're taking care of yourself, um, there's no limits to what's next.
Well, Dom, I thank you so much for sitting down with me over brunch and talk a little bit about your story and your mental health journey. And that has been this edition of Brunch with the Black Man. Thank you so much for tuning in.